So our next speaker is Emily Voris from the KDA, or Kansas Department of Ag, and she's going to talk to you guys a little bit about biosecurity and secure food supply. And we're really happy to have her, and her parents in the back are also visiting. So you're new to KDA, right?
I am.
Yeah, so please give her your full attention on biosecurity, and I implemented those booties and the foot baths on our behalf of K-State, trying to implement biosecurity protocols for sheep and goats. So take notes. And thanks for being here.
Yeah. So my name is Emily Voris. I am the Animal Health Planner at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. More specifically, I head up this initiative we call the Secure Food Supply Program. It's basically a state-level biosecurity program. So today I'm going to talk just a little bit about foreign animal diseases. We'll talk about the state of Kansas, the Secure Food Supply Program, and then some emergency response things that we're doing at the Department of Ag. So as we get into foreign animal diseases, there is a list of reportable diseases for sheep and goats that we care about in the state of Kansas. You can see those diseases listed in the red box there. So foot and mouth disease is obviously a concern across all livestock industries. Vesicular stomatitis, we test for that in sheep and goats as a rule out for foot and mouth disease because there's similar clinical signs, and so if we come out and test for VS, it's basically to rule out foot and mouth disease, and that's why that's reportable. You can see the list there. The other one that we do care about is rabies because it is a human health concern, and so we're not the lead agency on that. That's actually the Kansas Department of, or KDHE, so they are in charge of that, but it's something that you would report to us. So you can see there's quite a few diseases that we talk about that we care about, and so if you guys ever have questions about reporting these diseases, feel free to contact the Department of Ag. The disease that we talk the most about at KDA would be foot and mouth disease. I guess for lack of a better word, it's kind of the granddaddy of them all, since it affects every cloven hoofed species. So it's a highly contagious disease. Again, affects all cloven hoofed animals. It can be transmitted in a variety of different ways. It can be transmitted through the air, direct contact, people, clothing, manure, things like that. So highly, highly contagious, affects a wide variety of species. I only put these cattle and swine slides in here to make note that cattle we consider to be the disease indicators. So if foot and mouth was to be detected, we would probably see it in cattle first. Specifically, dairy cattle are probably shedding that disease in milk before they are showing clinical signs. So we do consider milk to be a product of risk also. So cattle are the disease indicators. We consider swine to be the disease amplifiers. So swine give off a lot of virus, and that virus can be moved in the air and spread a really long way. So swine is the amplifying host, and then sheep and goats, we consider them to be the maintenance host. Sheep and goats are kind of tricky because if they show clinical signs at all, they're probably minimal. So they sometimes call sheep the silent carriers. And so detecting foot and mouth disease in sheep is not only sometimes tricky, but it's also vital to stopping the spread of the disease. So you can see the clinical signs listed here: fever, lameness, oral lesions, and they can carry and shed the virus for 4 to 12 months. So here is the foot and mouth disease map of the world. The tip of South Africa should now be a different color because they're going through an outbreak right now. But as you can see, we are pretty much one of the only ones that does not have foot and mouth disease. And so we're trying to stay that way. And so that's where a lot of KDA's initiatives come in protecting ourselves. So you can see it's pretty much everywhere. So let's talk a little bit about the state of Kansas and why this is important to us. In the state, obviously livestock is a big deal. We feed and process 6.5 million head of cattle annually. We've got around 2.5 million head of swine in the state, and at any one time in Kansas, you could expect there to be around 100,000 head of hogs on the road. Goats, there's around 45,000 head of goats in the state. We milk around 175,000 dairy cows, and then there's 67,000 head of sheep in the state. We do consider ourselves an import state, so we are bringing livestock into our state, but mostly beef cattle. But with that, if we were to get a foreign animal disease like foot and mouth, that would obviously be detrimental to our industry because agriculture is number one in Kansas, and with that, animal agriculture is number one under that umbrella. And so, again, just protecting ourselves from the disease and essentially protecting our economy. So, just a little note on foreign animal disease investigations in the state. We do foreign animal disease investigations all the time. We don't announce them. We hope that we can, well, I'm not going to come out, but our vets are going to come out and do an investigation, tell you that you're good to go and move on, and you guys can continue with business. So we don't necessarily announce this, but we do think it's important that you guys know that if you do call us and report interesting clinical signs, or your vet calls us and says, hey, there's a problem, we will come out and investigate it. So we have had, I think, 9 or 10 investigations this year, and there's a couple pictures from those investigations. None of them have been in sheep and goats. Well, we've had one in sheep, but they've all been nutrition related. And so, again, we're happy to come out and do investigations if there is something that's not normal. So a foreign animal disease outbreak in the United States, the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility has put out that fun little number in the middle, that if we were to get foot and mouth disease in the states, we're looking at a $16 to $140 billion loss to our economy. Because the moment we get that disease, our exports shut down. So our trade is pretty much gone. Those loss of costs or loss of profit can be broken down into 2 major parts, so direct costs and indirect costs. Those direct costs are up there on the left-hand side. So obviously depopulation, disposal, cleaning and disinfecting, obviously the things that go along with a foreign animal disease outbreak. And then the right-hand side are the indirect costs. So our exports shut down, you're obviously losing money. And then there's some other pieces that we don't necessarily think about. Foot and mouth disease is not a human health concern, but it's obviously going to create some consumer fear because there's a lot of people that don't know that. And so not only consumer fear, but also producer fear. I would be worried about getting foot and mouth disease if we had an outbreak. And so direct and indirect costs. So with that, in the state of Kansas, if there was a foreign animal disease outbreak, foot and mouth disease, we would implement a stop movement alongside USDA. So USDA would suggest a stop movement of all livestock and livestock products, sheep, goats, cattle, any affected species, and milk. So that would change our day-to-day operations at the KDA. We would go from everyday mode to basically a response mode. But we know with stopping the movement of livestock, we're threatening industries and we're threatening people's business and livelihood. And so we had to create a tool at the KDA to basically keep you guys, people in business. And this is where secure food supply comes in. So these plans are not only to help protect yourself, but eventually they're to help industries get moving again. And so it's the best tool we have right now to feel safe about the movement of livestock during a foreign animal disease outbreak. So these plans can be broken down into 2 major parts. So the prevention, obviously pre-outbreak planning, which would be this plan, and then the response, which would be permitted movement. So like I mentioned, we would then if we had an outbreak, we would implement a stop movement and then we would proceed into permitted movement. And the only way that you can receive permitted movement is if you have one of these plans. So here's just kind of an overview of the plan. There's a bunch of different pieces. We'll kind of run through and I'll give you an overview of each of those. So it's basically an enhanced biosecurity plan. You're designating somebody who's in charge of biosecurity, identifying necessary movements. So as the sheep industry, identifying what has to be moved today. Can you guys hold on for 2 weeks? Can you hold on for a month? Can you hold on for 6 months? Or do you have livestock that need to be moved right this instant? That's up for you guys to decide. But just knowing those movements and knowing what needs to happen right now. And then KDA does provide assistance in this. The biggest piece of this biosecurity plan is what we call the line of separation. So this is actually a line of separation for a cow-calf operation, but I would assume it would be similar to many of your guys' sheep operations. There's some pastures in there. Obviously an entry and exit point. I like to describe the line of separation in reference to a castle. So instead of getting an infected premises and trying to contain the disease in one area, our goal is to keep the disease out. So if your operation is a castle, every castle has a moat around it, right? So the only way in and out of a moat is a drawbridge. So we would consider those to be your access points. The only way you can cross the drawbridge is if you've been cleaned and disinfected. So the only vehicles, people, equipment coming in or out of your operation would need to be cleaned and disinfected. Again, this is only during a foreign animal disease outbreak. Basically, it's to help keep you guys safe and protect you guys from not getting the disease. There's some employee training that goes along with this, whether it's mom and dad and your kids getting trained, or it's your employees getting trained, your vet knowing about your plan, whatever that looks like. Basically just knowing signs and symptoms of foot and mouth disease, knowing about your line of separation, all the pieces of a plan. And these are things that we can be talking about on a day-to-day basis also. So basic biosecurity things like you guys wore booties today. If you guys have farm tours and don't use booties now, like maybe that's something you can incorporate, just basic biosecurity. So talking with the people who work on your operation about those things. And then exercising your guys' biosecurity plan. So if you are a part of the Secure Food Supply Program, exercising this, standing up your plan for a day and let's see what it can do. If you normally have 5 access points to your operation, maybe limit it to 1 and see if it works. See if you can do that for 2 days or a day, or sit down and have a conversation with the people that work about a biosecurity plan. So there's different ways to do that. And again, if you would like help with that, KDA does provide assistance. Another part of this plan is record keeping, and that's something that we take pretty seriously at the KDA. If there was a foreign animal disease outbreak or a disease outbreak in general, we're going to expect records to be have been kept. So again, like I said, we would go into permitted movements, and I would probably call you and ask you about your biosecurity. I would ask for movement records, health records, training records of your employees or yourself. So all of these records are something that we would expect during a foreign animal disease outbreak. And then if you are a part of this program, there is a yearly assessment. It's pretty much just a conversation with myself about your biosecurity and your plan and what you're doing. It's pretty straightforward. So this fun little number here, $565 million, if we had foot and mouth disease in the United States and it went undetected for 2 weeks, so after 2 weeks, that next day, if it's still undetected, there's been some research done that we would lose $565 million every hour that disease is not detected. So getting this disease diagnosed and stopped, and stopping the spread of the disease is pretty much essential to saving our livestock industries. So with that, This is the map of the field vets in the state of Kansas. As you can see, there's quite a few of them. They are the ones that would come out and talk to you guys, do foreign animal disease investigations, things like that. So we really encourage you guys to build relationships with these people. They're more than happy to talk to you on the phone. They'll come out and visit whatever you feel you need. So in terms of disease investigation and detection, we really encourage relationships to be built with our field vets. And we do share a few vets with USDA. But that's who they are. So in Secure Food, we have 41 feed yards right now, 1.3 million head of cattle, around 1.6 million head of swine, 14 dairies, 117,000 dairy cattle. Also, the American Sheep Industry Association and the Wyoming State Veterinarian is in the process of creating secure sheep and wool plans. So if you guys are interested in being a part of that, I'll leave some cards at the back so you can contact me. Again, I'm a resource to your guys' industry, so if you have questions on biosecurity, whether it's commercial production or after a show or any biosecurity or disease management things, please feel free to contact me. And if I don't know the answer, I'm sure someone on my team does. So with that, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I know you're talking about putting out there the investigation, but I thought stomatitis was like a non-issue here.
Mm-hmm.
I learned they had an outbreak in Nebraska
Yep.
within the last couple of years.
Uh-huh.
Where does that come from? All of a sudden it shows up in Nebraska, and it's a little scary too.
Yeah. So we actually just talked about this in the office, but like I mentioned earlier, the testing for vesicular stomatitis is basically a rule out for foot and mouth disease. It can be spread across species, and so we do a lot of VS testing in horses. Like if you have horses on the back part of your ranch and sheep on the front, like there's possible transmission that way. And it does just show up randomly. Most diseases kind of happen that way. So yeah, that was a big outbreak. Any other questions? No? Well, that's my contact information. I'll leave some biosecurity stuff in the back in my card. So again, feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions or concerns. With that, thanks for having me.